The NBA playoffs are finally here. It's my favorite 2 to 3 months of the year, whatever it comes out to. And the round one series that I am most intrigued by is the veteran Miami Heat going up against the young guns, well, a couple of young guns and then a few veterans themselves of the 76ers. And I think there's some reason to believe that while Philly should be favorited in this, I think Miami has a real chance of pulling off the upset here for a few different reasons. Now, with all that being said, Joel Embiid is the best player in the series, and he may be good enough to win it by himself. He is going to miss game one, but hopefully that would be it for him. And Ben Simmons may even end up being the second best player in the series. He is abnormally good for a rookie, and maybe his rebounding, playmaking, and defense and all that stuff will be so impressive that Miami will not be able to exploit his weaknesses, which is something I am going to be talking about a bit in this thing. But what I will touch on right now is Markelle Fultz. I don't know how much he's really going to play in this series. He's shown good signs since he's come back, but not playing almost an entire season and being thrown right into high-stakes playoff basketball, that's a tough ask for anybody. So he's not going to be focused on as much in this video, I'll say. And I think with Simmons, you do have the team defense, which I feel is kind of necessary to force him to take jumpers and all that stuff, which I am sure Erik Spoelstra, who is a very good head coach, is going to find ways to do. But the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to defending Simmons is that Miami has a couple of guys who I think are ready to do that. The first one is James Johnson, who starts the power forward position. He's a big dude, he's physical, and he just kind of fits the profile, if you ask me. The second one is Justice Winslow, who could be even stronger than James Johnson is. And I would say these two guys, given that they're both, 6'7", 6'8", around there, they can simply stay in front of Ben Simmons. They can bump him around. They can force him to go to his plan B or maybe even his plan C. And I think that's step one to dealing with this Philadelphia team, right? Now, the next thing I want to talk about when it comes to Simmons is I think they are going to leave him kind of open sometimes, as in they are not going to respect his jump shot at all, which, to be fair, is not like some revolutionary thing. Teams have done this throughout the year, but I think Miami is going to be better at it than most teams are because Spoelstra, to me, is one of the best head coaches in the league, and this team is just full of natural defensive players who are going to find ways to bring extra help defenders off of Simmons and then get back to him before it's too late. Now, the thing is, though, like I mentioned, teams have done this all year. Simmons is going to make them pay for it sometimes. Okay, he attacks on closeouts. He cuts to the basket very well when you leave him wide open. I'm not saying Miami's going to have an easy time helping off of him, but I do think they're going to be pretty decent at it. And to get it back to Markelle real quick, I think everything I just said about Simmons can apply to him as well. I say Philly approaches defending both of them pretty much the same way. Again, I really don't know how many minutes Fultz is going to play. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up having some 12-minute games throughout the whole playoffs. Next, if we get to Joel Embiid. The first thing with Embiid, I do want to say, he is liable to shoot some jump shots. If you dare him, I do think he will hoist up a couple extra threes or a couple extra mid-range jumpers a game, which you'll always take over him posting up, and I think Miami's going to dare him to do that at sometimes. But of course, with him is the low post game, right, where he is about as impressive as you can be at this point. I mean, I would say at the top of the NBA in terms of post-up players, you have DeMarcus Cousins, Karl Anthony Towns, and Embiid is right up there, you know? The first thing we look at is Hassan Whiteside, who is really not that great of a defensive player. He's a good rim protector, not very good at the other things. And Miami has been a worse team when he's been in the game this season, so there is a chance that Whiteside could just be a disaster for them the moment he enters the game. But I do think it's interesting how, from at least a box score perspective, Whiteside has played Embiid almost neck and neck in their 4 matchups against one another, where they are 2-2. I mean, yeah, Embiid is a much better player overall, and probably was still better in those games when you look past the box score stuff. But I do think there's a chance that Whiteside could hinder some of what Embiid wants to do. He could go at him in terms of rebounds and pick and rolls and things like that. Another interesting thing is Kelly Olynyk. When he comes in the game, if he ever gets matched up on Embiid, what's going to happen there? Because the Heat do run Olynyk at center sometimes, and they might not be able to do that in this series because Embiid could just kill him in the low post, right? So I don't think they have the luxury of like someone who can really defend Embiid like that, the way that they do with Simmons. Now, there is Bam Adebayo, who I think is the best defensive center on this team. I mean, I don't know, is he ready for it? There's also the fact that Bam is not the tallest center in the world, whereas Joel Embiid is kind of like gargantuan, if you just see him on TV sometimes. But Bam is strong as hell in his own right. So I do think while it's going to require a team effort, he could give Embiid some problems. Now, if we get back to Olynyk. Olynyk, I think, could stretch out Embiid to the three-point line if they play him at center, and if they have Embiid defend him, but that could still be a wishy-washy matchup overall. I think the thing you really got to talk about, though, is how they're going to defend Embiid in the post, because no one guy can do it, right? I think Miami's going to find a way to double-team him and bring extra defenders in a way that he has not really seen all season, because once again, this is Erik Spoelstra with a veteran team who wins through grinding out games, and I mean, they'll beat you like 89 to 85. That's kind of how Miami plays, and I think they are going to cause a decent amount of problems for Embiid when it comes to just everything he wants to do. Now, does Philly have a lot of shooters? They do, but I think Miami is going to be very good at providing help, rotating, and just closing out on the JJ Redicks, Bellinellis of the world when they're doubling Embiid. Now, the other thing you got to talk about with Embiid is that he is an excellent defender in his own right, as, I mean, this Philadelphia team is a very good defensive team. And, I mean, this isn't just going to be a one-sided video where I say Miami's got a chance and that's it. I have to make the case for Philly. There's a chance that the Sixers' defense is going to be so good that Miami just can't generate enough points, because the Heat are already one of the bottom-tier offensive teams in the league anyway. And if you're going to go up against a team who's got Embiid at 5, you've got Robert Covington who can defend, 1 through 4 pretty successfully. And, I mean, Embiid and Covington together, that's like one of the best 1-2 defensive punches that you can come up with in the league today. Ben Simmons has also been a damn good defender as well, so there's a lot of switch abilities on this Heat team, or excuse me, this Philadelphia team. So I'm not going to act like Miami's the only ones who have some things that they can exploit out of their opponent, you know? Of course, Philly can also create a lot of transition buckets. And now if we can get to that Heat offense, I feel like they have some strengths as well as some weaknesses in the way they play. Now, the strength is they move the ball very well. There's handoffs and off-ball screens and cuts to the basket, and I do think that they are going to find some ways, creative ways to score on the Philadelphia 76ers. However, they don't have the one guy who can just create offense out of nowhere, which has always been a necessity in the playoffs unless you're the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, can Dragic have one game where he goes off for like 30 points? Potentially. Dwayne Wade's always going to have that one game where he hits 5 threes in the playoffs. But I don't know if they have enough of those guys to do it 4 different times. So, I mean, it's going to be a rough series. It's going to be a grinded out series, and I think this is a really good first test for Philly. Because this Heat team, I think they're going to give them some problems. I do. I think Spoelstra's very smart. I think he's going to find ways to go at Simmons and Embiid's weaknesses. And I do think this series is going 7 games.